A fun part of a district conference is a tour of various gardens. Today's tour will take us on a tour of the Stansbury's home and garden in Chico, California. The commentators have signed a speaker consent form for Sierra Foothill Rose Society and the Coop's Rose Ranch in Roseville. This will include music that is owned by the videographer that produced the video.
Good morning, everyone. It's not quite as smoky as it has been. Mike Bertain and I, Julie Matlin, consulting rosarians for the American Rose Society and for the Butte Rose Society here in Chico, welcome you to the house at 5th and Salem. This handsome, historic, 1883 Victorian was the home of Chico's most respected and beloved physician, Dr. Oscar Stansbury, his wife Libby, and 3 children. He also had his office here as well. When he came in 1875, he wasn't expecting to stay for 50 years, and yet he did, and he ministered to all of the residents of Chico, and as well as bringing public health, clean water, vaccinations, public sanitation, and the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1902. His wife Libby was also very involved in public affairs, helped her husband in all endeavors, but she was also a very avid gardener. And once his house was finished in August of 1883, she started putting in roses, hydrangeas, lilies, and the foundation plantings that she wanted, all of which she got from John Bidwell's Chico Rancho Nursery. Mike was consulted in March of 2020 about looking over the garden and evaluating it. It was in terrible need of some TLC. He is the consummate consulting rosarian, always willing to step up, always willing to answer questions, and is a stickler for details, which speaks his medical background. When he asked me if I would like to help, I couldn't say anything except yes. It's been a year and a half of complete garden restoration. We went from a rose garden to the entire piece of property, and Mike will walk you through it and show you what's been accomplished so far.
Hello, I'm Mike Bertain, a retired physician assistant and cancer survivor. And during my cancer treatment, when I no longer could take care of patients, I turned my focus to my gardens. And I'd always grown roses, but I became more focused on growing roses for exhibition, and that's when I found the Butte Rose Society and the American Rose Society, and master rosarians like Julie to help expand my knowledge of roses. And gradually over the years I've had the opportunity to tour in Europe. I was able to go to England and actually visit the great David Austin's nursery outside of Manchester and expand my knowledge. And then we had the opportunity to come to this garden and consult initially on the roses, and then it gradually has expanded into a restoration of this garden. It had gone into disrepair, but also many of the plants had been removed and other plants put in, and Julie was able to go back through the catalogs of John Bidwell and her knowledge, and we've gradually restored this garden back to plants that would have been in this garden in the late 1800s and into the early 1900s, and we'd like to show that to you today. We use this garden for special events in conjunction with 5th Street Steakhouse next door. We'll be doing weddings, and we do an ice cream social and Christmas events, all of which where we can share the house and the gardens with the community. And our goal really is to keep this place restored as a museum, as the main house is, but also the gardens. We're interested in keeping them as a historical place to be able to teach a bit about what plants were used at that time and how the Stansburys built this whole property up to what it is today. So we're going to gradually walk the gardens, and I'll try to show you the micro systems around the house, as each area of the house has different sun exposure and shade. That dictates what plants can be grown in that area, and you'll see that as we go. As we look to my left, we have a large lawn area. This is where the special events are done in conjunction with 5th Street Steakhouse next door. This is where we would set up for weddings. And behind me here, you can see the beautiful house and all of its magnitude here. It really is a beautiful Victorian, and actually is the architecture is called Italianate, which is a combination of the Victorian and the Gothic style that were very popular at the time. The plant here behind Julie is the one plant that we know is historic from photographs that we've had, which we're calling the Stansbury hydrangea. There are pictures of this hydrangea 2 or 3 times bigger than it is today, and that's because there was a big tree here that shaded it, and that created a microsystem here that really was probably better for the hydrangea in those days. Now the Chico heat tends to get to it a little bit, but that tree is long gone now and needs to stay gone so we can have our events in this property. Now I'm going to move back towards this the divider here between the 5th Street Steakhouse and us. This is planted with David Austin climbing roses, and but the plan here is to gradually remove the David Austins and replace them with climbing old garden roses that were more period oriented, and Julie is working on that at this time. So that these roses actually will be period also. And here on my right here is a new arch that we've integrated into the garden to allow access between the properties so that a bride might be able to use the building behind us here and access a wedding area here at the Stansbury. I'm standing on the pathway that would have been used by the buggies and horses at the time. And that was made, this property was developed so that the buggy could come right through and out the other side. And they would have hooked up right here, because as we're looking back, and I'm going to move around to this side so you can see, this was Dr. Stansbury's office. And so the buggies would have pulled up and actually accessed his office here behind me. The horses would have been tied up, the buggies, so that the patient could come in and see him. Here on my left is the cutting rose garden that Libby Stansbury took care of herself. She was very involved in the roses and the other flowering plants on the property because she decorated the house on a regular basis with fresh flowers, especially for special events, but every day she would come out and pick flowers for the garden. This garden is also being gradually restored back to roses that are listed in the catalog for John Bidwell, so that we can really say that this is a historical garden. That's also true of the crepe myrtles and hydrangeas and lilies that are here in the backdrop. All of these are something that John Bidwell would have had available in his catalog. Now we're going to move back towards the carriage house. The carriage house has been restored by the city of Chico and is pretty new, but was built to as many specifications as we could to restore the actual property itself. And as we're coming back, here also was an area that Libby Bidwell had Stansbury, had a peony garden that grew here in front of the doctor's office, where she had hydrangeas and peonies that were all picked for the inside the house. And here in front of the house also is a giant pecan. There are many pecan trees on the property, which we think reflect the fact that Dr. Stansbury's father was a pecan grower in Mississippi. And he brought that expertise to this property and planted the pecan trees. So the carriage house would have housed the carriage that Dr. Bidwell used to do his house calls, and with the horses were not kept here on this property, but down the street a bit. But they were brought down, hooked up, and a groomsman actually lived in this property upstairs above the carriage house. Now we're going to move back towards the back part of the house, where the ecosystem changes again. This is a very sunny, hot area of the property, and we think this was the property that the kitchen garden would have been grown in. Libby would have had herbs and vegetables that grew here. Though she had a grocer that actually came to the house on a daily basis with his cart, she also would have grown herbs and other vegetables here right on the property. The carriage would have accessed from this far side as either people were coming or going here from the property. And we're going to move now around to the microclimate that's on the east side of the property. I should mention that just right here on the right is a small gazebo that is a memorial to Grace Allred, who was a benefactor of the property early on. Grace actually owned the buildings next to the property and was a major benefactor to the original structure here and the care of the gardens. Now we're going to move into our more shaded garden. This is shaded by dogwoods and the pecan trees, and has been the best garden for hydrangeas and azaleas and many of the cut flowers that Libby would have brought into the house that's different from the roses. So as we move along, this area, Julie has spent a lot of time trying to again restore plants that were part of the catalogs that she has from John Bidwell's time. And this garden is just beginning to come back, but has been a significant focus for Julie. The camellias and azaleas in this part of the property were significant, and we've gradually been able to prune them back and try to restore them. They were quite out of control when we came on board. Towards the front of the house, we have old roses that we hopefully will continue to restore. That was a part of the presentation from the front of the house, and Julie has interplanted here with many of the ferns that also were part of the property. Ferns were also grown significantly here in Chico, even though it was as hot as it was. They were a main part of this garden. So I wanted to thank you for taking this little tour with us, and I'll turn it back over to Julie.
Michael has walked you through the gardens of Libby and Oscar Stansbury. There are a few comments I'd like to make. Number one, this was a home for 93 years of the Stansbury family only, so the interior is completely original. We invite everybody to come to Chico and see this beautiful, beautiful home. Number two, I want to say that what started as just a small garden evaluation and restoration turned into a consulting rosarian's paradise. As Michael and I have worked through this garden for the last year and a half, we have come to find, number one, as we said earlier, the fact that most of John Bidwell's plants to be found in his catalog are in this garden today, which we are very lucky to have, but also the fact that in spite of COVID, many people have come in, asked us about pruning the roses, about caring for the garden. So as consulting rosarians, this has been a workshop. It's a training area for us, and we can't promote what we do for the community enough because we want to teach people about how to care for the roses and to care for their plants. One last thing. Oscar Stansbury came from a long line of doctors. His father, yes, was a pecan planter, but he was also the doctor for all the slaves on the plantations in Carrollton, Mississippi, 3,000 miles away, where his family originally lived. And number two, there's a fence around us. It's only here because as sheep and horses and cows were put through the streets of this town, stampeded, they kept taking out Libby's gardens, and she got angry, so she had a fence put up. And please come and visit us in Chico. We'd love to see you, and thank you. Have a great day.